The morning sun cast long shadows across the palace courtyard as William stood at the window, watching the gardeners tend to the roses that Kate had planted 3 springs ago. His reflection stared back at him, older now with lines around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and difficult decisions. The weight of responsibility had always been heavy, but today it felt crushing. Kate entered the room quietly, her footsteps barely audible on the polished marble floor. She carried 2 cups of tea, a ritual they had shared every morning for the past 15 years. The simple act had become their anchor in a world that constantly demanded their attention, their presence, their sacrifice. "The children are asking questions again," she said softly, settling into the chair beside him. Her voice carried the familiar warmth that had first drawn him to her all those years ago at university. But underneath it was something new, a fragility that made his heart ache. William turned from the window, accepting the cup with hands that trembled slightly. "What did you tell them?" "The truth, as much as they can understand." Kate's fingers wrapped around her teacup, seeking warmth that had nothing to do with the temperature of the liquid. That sometimes life asks us to make choices we never wanted to make. But that love remains constant regardless of distance or circumstance. The diagnosis had come 6 months ago, delivered in a sterile hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and broken dreams. The words had hit them like a physical blow. Aggressive, advanced, limited time. The doctors had been kind but honest, offering treatments that might extend life but couldn't promise to save it. In the weeks that followed, they had tried to maintain normalcy for the children, for the public, for themselves. But behind closed doors, they were learning to navigate a new reality, where every moment carried the weight of being potentially among their last together. "The Prime Minister called this morning," William said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The arrangements are almost complete. The security detail has been briefed and the location has been secured." Kate nodded, though the simple gesture seemed to take enormous effort. They had chosen a small cottage in Scotland, far from the cameras and the crowds, where they could spend these final weeks as a family rather than as public figures. It was a luxury that their positions rarely afforded them, but under these circumstances, even the most protocol-conscious advisors had agreed it was necessary. "I keep thinking about our wedding day," Kate said, a sad smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Do you remember how nervous you were? You kept adjusting your uniform and your father had to tell you 3 times to stop fidgeting." William's throat tightened. "I remember thinking I was the luckiest man alive. That feeling has never changed even now." The weight of unspoken words hung between them. There was so much they wanted to say, so much they needed to express, but somehow the magnitude of their situation made ordinary language feel inadequate. "How do you summarize a lifetime of love in the face of its ending?" Kate reached across the space between their chairs and took his hand. Her skin was cooler than usual, another reminder of the battle her body was fighting. "We need to tell them today. The children deserve to understand why we're leaving the city, why everything is changing." The thought of that conversation filled William with dread. How do you explain to young minds that the world they've always known is about to shift irrevocably? How do you prepare them for a goodbye that no child should have to face? "Together," he said firmly. "We tell them together, just like we faced everything else." Outside, the city of London continued its daily rhythm, unaware that within the palace walls, a love story that had captivated the world was entering its final chapter. The public had followed their romance from its university beginnings through a royal wedding that had been watched by billions. They had celebrated the births of their children, supported them through difficult times, and found hope in their seemingly unshakable bond. Now, as Kate's strength waned with each passing day, that same public would soon learn that even fairy tales must sometimes face the harsh realities of mortality. But they would also witness something extraordinary, a demonstration of grace under pressure that would redefine what it means to face adversity with dignity. Kate stood slowly, her movement careful and deliberate. "Should we gather them in the sitting room? The one with the family photos?" William nodded, understanding the significance of the choice. That room held the visual history of their life together. Pictures from holidays, official portraits, candid moments captured by palace photographers. It was where they had always shared important family conversations, where they had established the tradition of honesty and openness that had guided their parenting. As they prepared to leave the study, Kate paused at the doorway. "William, Whatever happens in the coming weeks, I want you to remember that every day we've had together has been a gift. Even facing this together, is a blessing that many people never experience." Her words carried a strength that belied her physical condition, reminding him why he had fallen in love with her in the first place. Kate had always possessed an inner fortitude that complemented his own struggles with duty and expectation. She had shown him how to find joy in small moments, how to balance public responsibility with private happiness. Now, as they prepared for the most difficult conversation of their lives, that same strength would guide them through uncharted territory. They would face their children's questions with honesty, their own fears with courage, and their uncertain future with the same unity that had carried them through 15 years of marriage. The palace around them held centuries of history, witnessed countless royal dramas and celebrations, but in this moment, it was simply home to a family preparing to navigate the most challenging chapter of their story together. The world would watch as it always did, but this time they would see something beyond ceremony and tradition. They would witness the raw power of love in its purest form. The sitting room felt different that afternoon, charged with an emotional weight that even the children seemed to sense. 8-year-old Charlotte sat cross-legged on the Persian rug, her dark hair falling forward as she concentrated on a puzzle. 10-year-old George had claimed his usual spot in the large armchair, a book about airplanes open in his lap, though his eyes kept drifting toward his parents. 5-year-old Louis was building an elaborate castle with wooden blocks, his tongue poking out in concentration. William and Kate exchanged a glance that spoke volumes. They had rehearsed this conversation in their minds countless times, but now, faced with their children's innocent expectation of normalcy, the words felt impossible to speak. "Can you put your activities aside for a moment?" Kate asked gently. "Daddy and I need to talk with you about something important." Charlotte looked up first, her intuitive nature picking up on the unusual solemnity in her mother's voice. George closed his book with a snap, and Louis abandoned his blocks with the careless ease of childhood. They gathered on the sofa, Charlotte in the middle, the boys on either side, their faces upturned with curiosity rather than concern. William cleared his throat, searching for words that would be truthful yet age-appropriate. "You know how Mummy hasn't been feeling well lately? And how she's been going to the doctor more often?" 3 pairs of eyes, so like his own, fixed on him intently. Charlotte nodded slowly, her expression growing more serious. She had always been perceptive beyond her years, often noticing things that adults assumed children would miss. "The doctors have been working very hard to help Mummy feel better," Kate continued, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "But sometimes even when doctors try their very best, they can't fix everything." George shifted uncomfortably, his young mind beginning to process implications that he wasn't quite ready to understand. "Does that mean the medicine isn't working?" "It means that the medicine is helping me feel comfortable, but it can't make me completely well again," Kate explained, choosing her words with the care of someone who understood their lasting impact. "My body is very sick, and while we're going to keep trying everything we can, we also need to prepare for the possibility that I might not get better." Louis, at 5, was the first to voice the question that hung in the air. "Are you going to die like Grandmama's dog did?" The directness of childhood could be both heartbreaking and liberating. William felt his chest tighten, but Kate answered with a calmness that amazed him. "I might, sweetheart. We don't know exactly when or how, but we do know that we want to spend as much time together as possible, while I'm feeling well enough to enjoy it." Charlotte's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. Instead, she scooted closer to her mother, taking Kate's hand in both of hers.
"Is that why we're going to Scotland?"
"To spend time together?" "Yes," William said, his voice thick with emotion. "We're going somewhere quiet and beautiful where we can just be a family, without all the usual responsibilities and interruptions." The cottage in Scotland had been Kate's idea. She had visited it once as a child with her own family, and the memory of its peaceful surroundings had stayed with her through all the years of royal duties and public appearances. It sat on the shore of a small loch, surrounded by heather-covered hills and ancient oak trees. There would be no servants except for essential security, no formal schedules, no official engagements. "Will there be horses?" George asked, his practical mind already moving toward the details that mattered to him. Kate smiled, the first genuine smile she had managed all day. "There might be wild ponies on the moors." And definitely sheep. Lots and lots of sheep. Can we fish in the lake? Louis wanted to know, his resilience already reasserting itself in the way that children manage to do. Every day if you want to, William promised. We can teach you to fly fish properly, and maybe catch enough trout for dinner. Charlotte remained quiet, processing the information with an intensity that reminded both parents of themselves at that age. Finally, she looked up at Kate with eyes that seemed far too old for her 8 years. Will it hurt? She asked simply. Kate pulled her daughter close, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. The doctors are making sure that I'm comfortable, and having all of you with me makes everything easier. What about when we come back? George asked. What happens to us? It was William who answered this time, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent his entire life preparing for responsibility. You'll always be taken care of. Daddy will be here, and Grandpa Charles and Uncle Harry. We're a family, and families stick together no matter what happens. The conversation continued for another hour, with questions that ranged from practical concerns about school and friends to deeper wonderings about death and what came after. William and Kate answered everything as honestly as they could, creating a framework of truth that their children could build upon as they grew older. When the formal discussion ended, they didn't disperse to their usual activities. Instead, they remained curled together on the sofa, a tangle of arms and legs in unconditional love. Kate read from a book of fairy tales, her voice growing hoarse toward the end but never faltering. William told stories about his own childhood adventures, painting pictures of a world where problems could be solved with courage and imagination. As evening approached, they ordered pizza to be delivered to the palace, a rare break from formal dining that felt like the most natural thing in the world. They ate sitting on the floor of the sitting room, using the coffee table as their dining surface, laughing at Louis's attempts to fold his slice properly, and Charlotte's insistence that pineapple belonged on pizza, despite her brother's protests. Later, after the children had been tucked into bed with extra stories and longer hugs, William and Kate found themselves alone in their bedroom. The day had been emotionally exhausting, but there was also a sense of relief in having shared the truth. They're stronger than I expected, Kate said, sitting at her dressing table and slowly removing the simple jewelry she wore for family time. They get that from you, William replied, watching her reflection in the mirror. Even now, weakened by illness and treatment, she possessed a grace that took his breath away. They get it from both of us, she corrected, and from all the generations that came before us. That's what we're really giving them, not just our love, but the strength to carry on when love has to live in memory instead of presence. Outside their bedroom windows, London sparkled in the darkness, unaware that within the palace walls, a family was learning to compress a lifetime of love into whatever time remained. Tomorrow would bring the logistics of departure, the security briefings, the careful choreography required to move members of the royal family without attracting unwanted attention. But tonight was for quiet reflection and the kind of intimacy that had sustained them through 15 years of marriage. Tonight was for remembering why their love story had captured the world's imagination, and for preparing to show that same world how grace could triumph even in the face of unimaginable loss. The convoy of dark vehicles moved through the Scottish countryside like shadows against the morning mist. Inside the lead car, Kate rested her head against the window, watching the landscape transform from the manicured countryside of southern England to the wild, untamed beauty of the Highlands. The children had fallen asleep in the back seat, exhausted by the early departure and the emotional weight of the past few days. William drove in comfortable silence, his hands steady on the wheel despite the turmoil in his heart. They had chosen to make this journey themselves rather than relying on royal drivers, wanting these final weeks to feel as normal as possible. Behind them, discreet security vehicles maintained their distance, a necessary reminder of their public roles even in this most private of times. The cottage appeared around a bend in the narrow road like something from a storybook. Built of local stone with a slate roof weathered by decades of highland storms, it sat nestled between ancient oak trees at the edge of a pristine loch. Smoke curled from the chimney, indicating that the advance team had already arrived and prepared the house for their stay. "It's perfect," Kate whispered, her voice filled with wonder. The cottage was exactly as she remembered from her childhood visit, perhaps a bit smaller than her 8-year-old memory had painted it. but no less magical for its modest scale. Charlotte stirred first as the car came to a stop, blinking sleepily at their surroundings. "Are we really going to live here?" she asked, her voice carrying the awe that children reserved for truly special places. "For a while," William confirmed, already moving to help his family from the car. The crisp Highland air filled their lungs, carrying the scent of heather and the clean smell of the loch. It was a stark contrast to London's urban atmosphere, and Kate felt some of the tension she had been carrying for months begin to ease. The cottage's interior was simple, but comfortable, with exposed wooden beams and furniture that prioritized coziness over formality. A fire crackled in the main room's hearth, and through the windows, they could see the loch stretching away toward distant mountains. It was exactly what Kate had hoped for, a place where they could simply be a family without the weight of protocol and public expectation. The first few days passed in a blur of exploration and adjustment. The children discovered a small boat moored at the cottage's private dock, and William spent hours teaching them the basics of rowing. Kate watched from a chair on the shore, wrapped in warm blankets, her medical team's portable equipment discreetly positioned nearby but never intrusive. George proved to be a natural fisherman, his patience and focus serving him well as he learned to cast a line. Charlotte preferred exploring the shoreline, collecting interesting stones and shells while spinning elaborate stories about the creatures that might live in the loch's depths. Louis was content to splash in the shallow water, chasing minnows and building dams with rocks. In the evenings, they gathered around the cottage's dining table for simple meals that Kate insisted on helping to prepare, despite her family's gentle protests. The act of cooking together, something that had been impossible in their formal London life, became a cherished ritual. They made pasta with cream sauce, grilled fresh trout that George had caught, and baked bread that filled the cottage with the most wonderful aromas. Kate's condition fluctuated daily, sometimes hourly. Some mornings she woke with energy that seemed almost normal, able to join the children on short walks and participate fully in their activities. Other days, the fatigue was overwhelming, and she spent most of her time resting while her family brought the outside world to her, through stories and small treasures they discovered. On one particularly difficult day, when Kate was too weak to leave her bed, Charlotte appeared in the doorway with her arms full of wildflowers. "I thought these might make you feel better, Mummy," she said, arranging the purple heather and white clover in a water glass with the serious concentration of a professional florist. "They're beautiful." "Darling," Kate managed, though speaking took considerable effort. "Tell me where you found them." Charlotte launched into an elaborate description of her morning expedition, complete with dramatic reenactments of her encounters with various Highland creatures. Her storytelling was so animated and engaging that even William found himself laughing, despite the circumstances. These moments of normalcy were precious beyond measure. They played board games by lamplight when the Highland weather turned stormy. William read aloud from adventure novels while the children sprawled across Kate's bed, everyone sharing the same space with an intimacy that their royal life rarely permitted. They told ghost stories that made Louis hide under his blanket, and Kate shared memories of her own childhood that painted pictures of a simpler time. The security team, led by a veteran protection officer named James, maintained their vigilance with remarkable discretion. They had transformed the cottage's small guest house into a command center, monitoring communications and maintaining contact with London, while ensuring that the family's privacy remained absolute. No photographers lurked in the heather. No reporters tried to breach their sanctuary. William found himself changing in ways he hadn't expected. Away from the constant demands of royal duty, he rediscovered parts of himself that had been buried under years of protocol and responsibility. He taught the children to skip stones across the loch's surface, a skill he had learned from his own father decades earlier. He built elaborate sand castles on the small beach and wasn't embarrassed when other adults might have considered such activities beneath his dignity. Kate watched these transformations with deep satisfaction. She had always known that William carried the weight of his position heavily, sometimes at the cost of simple joy. Now, with time running short, she was witnessing him reconnect with the man she had fallen in love with at university. Someone who could be silly and spontaneous, who prioritized his family's happiness above all other considerations. The nights were perhaps the most precious time of all. After the children were asleep, William and Kate would sit together on the cottage's small porch, wrapped in warm blankets and watching the stars reflect on the loch's surface. They talked about everything and nothing, shared memories, hopes for their children's futures, and sometimes just the comfortable silence of two people who had loved each other long enough that words weren't always necessary. During one such evening, as the aurora borealis painted the northern sky in shades of green and gold, Kate reached for William's hand. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" "For this. For making it possible for us to have this time together. For putting us first when duty has always demanded that you put the country first." William squeezed her hand gently. "You and the children are my country," he replied. "Everything else is just geography." The comment was so unlike his usual careful consideration of words and their implications that Kate laughed, the first truly carefree laugh she had managed in months. The sound echoed across the still water, a note of joy in the midst of sorrow that somehow made their situation more bearable rather than more painful. As they prepared for bed that night, Kate felt a peace she hadn't experienced since her diagnosis. Whatever time remained to them, they were spending it exactly as she had hoped. Not as public figures playing roles, but as a family discovering that love could transcend even the most difficult circumstances. 3 weeks into their Highland retreat, Kate's condition took a noticeable turn. The good days became fewer, the periods of rest longer, and the medications more frequent. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the oncologist who had become as much friend as physician over the past months, arrived at the cottage with a small medical team and equipment that could provide comfort without intruding on the family's precious time together. William found himself learning to read the subtle signs that indicated how Kate was feeling the way she held her. Shoulders when pain was manageable versus when it was overwhelming, the particular quality of her breathing that told him she needed rest. The forced brightness in her voice when she was pushing herself beyond her limits for the children's sake. The children, with the remarkable adaptability of youth, adjusted their expectations and activities to match their mother's energy levels. Charlotte became an expert at quiet entertainment, bringing books to read aloud when Kate was resting, or setting up elaborate tea parties with her dolls that could be enjoyed from bed. George appointed himself the family's chief photographer, documenting their days with a vintage camera that William had found in the cottage's closet. Louis, perhaps because of his age or temperament, seemed to accept the situation with the least visible distress. He would climb into bed with Kate for morning cuddles that sometimes lasted for hours, chattering about his dreams or the adventures he planned for the day ahead. His uncomplicated acceptance of whatever time he was given with his mother provided a model for the rest of the family. Dr. Mitchell proved to be more than just a medical professional. She had experience helping families navigate end-of-life situations, and her presence brought both practical support and emotional guidance. She taught William how to manage Kate's medications, explained what symptoms to watch for, and perhaps most importantly, helped the family understand that choosing comfort over aggressive treatment was not giving up. It was choosing quality over quantity in the time that remained. On a misty morning in their 4th week at the cottage, Kate woke with surprising energy and announced that she wanted to take the children on a proper Highland adventure. William initially resisted, concerned about her strength for such an excursion, but her determination was unmistakable. They packed a picnic lunch and set off across the moors behind the cottage, following ancient sheep paths that wound through heather and gorse. Kate moved slowly but steadily, pausing frequently to examine wildflowers or point out birds to the children. The Highland ponies that grazed freely in the area proved to be a particular delight. Approaching the family with curious friendliness, "Look, Mummy," Charlotte called as one of the ponies nuzzled her outstretched hand. "She likes me." "Animals can sense kindness," Kate replied, settling carefully onto a large stone to rest. "You have a gentle spirit, just like your great-grandmother did." These references to family history had become more frequent as Kate's condition progressed. She seemed determined to ensure that the children understood their place in a larger story, that they carried with them not just their parents' love but the accumulated wisdom and strength of generations. They found a perfect spot for their picnic, beside a small waterfall that tumbled down, moss-covered rocks into a crystal-clear pool. The children immediately began exploring, discovering tiny fish in the shallow water and competing to see who could find the most interesting stones. William spread blankets on the grass while Kate supervised from a comfortable position against a sun-warmed boulder. "This is what I want them to remember," she said quietly, watching Louis attempt to build a bridge across the narrow stream with carefully balanced rocks. "Not the hospital visits or the sad conversations, but days like this when we were all together and happy." William settled beside her, close enough to provide support if needed, but careful not to hover. "They'll remember all of it," he said. "But you're right. These are the memories that will sustain them." During lunch, Charlotte surprised everyone by producing a small notebook from her backpack. "I've been writing down things I don't want to forget," she announced with 8-year-old seriousness. "Like how Mummy hums when she's cooking, and the way Daddy's laugh sounds different when he's really happy versus when he's just being polite." The observation was so perceptive and mature that both parents were momentarily speechless. Kate reached for the notebook, and Charlotte willingly shared her careful recordings of family life. Page after page contained detailed observations about their relationships, their individual quirks, and the small moments that made their family unique. "This is beautiful. Darling," Kate said, her voice thick with emotion. "You're creating something precious that will help you remember not just what happened, but how it felt." George produced his camera and insisted on taking formal family portraits beside the waterfall. His artistic eye, inherited perhaps from Kate's love of photography, resulted in images that captured not just their physical presence but something essential about their emotional state. In later years, these photos would become treasured documentation of their last truly carefree day together. The return journey to the cottage took longer than expected, as Kate's energy waned more quickly than usual. William carried Louis on his shoulders for the final mile, while Charlotte walked close beside her mother, ready to offer support without being asked. They reached home as the sun was setting, painting the loch in shades of gold and crimson. That evening, Kate made an announcement that surprised everyone. "I want to write letters," she said as they gathered around the fireplace after dinner. "To each of you and to some special people in our lives. Things I want to make sure are said, even if I can't say them later." The children accepted this request with the same matter-of-fact acceptance they had shown throughout their Highland stay. Charlotte offered to help with the writing if Kate's hands got tired, while George suggested that they could include some of his photographs with the letters. Over the following days, Kate spent hours at the cottage's small writing desk, crafting messages that would carry her love forward into a future she wouldn't share. She wrote to each child individually, creating letters to be opened on important milestones, birthdays, graduations, wedding days. She penned heartfelt notes to William's family, thanking them for their acceptance and support over the years. The letter to William proved to be the most difficult to write. How do you encapsulate 15 years of marriage, 3 beautiful children, and a love that had grown stronger through both triumph and adversity? She started and stopped dozens of times, finally settling on something that focused not on goodbye but on gratitude and hope for his future. Dr. Mitchell observed these activities with professional approval. "She's creating legacy," she explained to William during one of their private consultations. "It's one of the most important things people can do when facing end of life, ensuring that their values and love continue beyond their physical presence." The cottage had become more than just a retreat from public life. It had transformed into a sacred space where a family was learning to love without limitation, to treasure each moment without being paralyzed by the knowledge of their finite nature. The Highland landscape provided a backdrop of timeless beauty that somehow made their temporary situation feel part of a larger, eternal story. As Kate's strength continued to ebb, the family adapted their rhythms to match her needs. Mornings were often her best time, when pain medications were most effective and her energy highest. Afternoons brought fatigue that required rest and quiet activities. Evenings were for gentle conversations and the kind of closeness that needed no words. Through it all, the love that had brought them together and sustained them through years of public scrutiny remained undiminished. If anything, facing mortality together had stripped away everything non-essential, leaving only what truly mattered: their commitment to each other and their determination to face whatever came with grace and dignity. The 5th week brought changes that could no longer be ignored or managed with determination alone. Kate's periods of wakefulness grew shorter, her appetite diminished, and simple activities that had been possible just days before now required tremendous effort. Dr. Mitchell increased her presence at the cottage, her medical team now maintaining round-the-clock availability while still respecting the family's need for privacy and normalcy. William found himself taking on roles he had never imagined, not just as caregiver, but as the primary interpreter of their new reality for the children. He learned to administer medications with steady hands, to recognize the signs that indicated Kate needed immediate attention, and, most challengingly, to balance honesty about their situation with hope for whatever time remained. The children responded to these changes in ways that reflected their individual personalities. Charlotte became intensely protective of their family time, politely but firmly declining video calls from well-meaning relatives and insisting that each day's activities be planned around Kate's comfort and energy levels. George threw himself into projects that could be shared with his mother, building an elaborate model airplane that they worked on together during her alert periods, learning to cook simple meals that might tempt her diminished appetite. Louis seemed to possess an intuitive understanding of what his mother needed most. He would curl up beside her during the long afternoon rests, not demanding conversation or entertainment, but simply providing the comfort of his presence. His small hand would find hers, and they would drift together in a peaceful silence that spoke more eloquently than words. On a particularly difficult morning, when Kate was too weak to leave her bed and pain medications weren't providing their usual relief, Charlotte made an announcement that surprised everyone. "I want to have a celebration," she declared with 8-year-old certainty. Not a sad goodbye party, but a celebration of all the good things we've had together. The idea sparked something in Kate that even strong medications hadn't been able to provide, in a sense of purpose and joy that transcended her physical limitations. "What kind of celebration did you have in mind, sweetheart?" Charlotte had clearly given this considerable thought. "We could make a memory book with all of George's photographs, and we could cook your favorite meal, and maybe we could have a dance party in the sitting room." William started to express concerns about Kate's energy level, but she silenced him with a look that carried all the determination that had made him fall in love with her years ago. "I think that sounds perfect," she said. "But we'll need everyone to help, and we'll do it over several days so I can participate as much as possible." The project became a family mission that energized everyone despite the underlying sadness of their circumstances. George organized his photographs chronologically, creating a visual narrative of their Highland weeks that captured everything from the children's fishing expeditions to quiet moments of Kate reading by the fireplace. Charlotte appointed herself chief decorator, fashioning garlands from heather and wildflowers that transformed the cottage's main room into something magical. Kate's contribution was the menu planning, though she knew she would likely only be able to taste, rather than truly eat, most of what they prepared. She chose dishes that held special significance: the pasta carbonara that William had attempted to make for her on their first anniversary, the chocolate cake that had become a tradition for children's birthdays, the roasted chicken with herbs that reminded her of Sunday dinners at her parents' home. The cooking became a multi-day affair, with each family member taking responsibility for different elements. Louis proved surprisingly adept at measuring ingredients, his careful attention to detail ensuring perfect proportions. Charlotte discovered a talent for decorating, turning simple dishes into works of art with careful garnishes and elegant presentation. William found himself remembering why he had always loved cooking, despite the palace chef's insistence that it was unnecessary for someone of his position. There was something deeply satisfying about creating something beautiful and nourishing with his own hands, especially when those efforts brought such obvious joy to his family. Kate participated as much as her strength allowed, offering guidance and encouragement from a comfortable chair, positioned where she could observe all the activity. Her presence transformed what could have been a sad farewell into something that felt more like a graduation, a celebration of lessons learned and love shared. Dr. Mitchell observed these preparations with professional interest and personal admiration. She had worked with many families facing similar circumstances, but rarely had she seen such grace in approaching mortality. "What you're creating here," she told William during one of their private conversations, "is exactly what grief counselors try to help families achieve after loss, a focus on celebration rather than just sorrow." The evening of their celebration arrived with perfect Highland weather, clear skies that allowed the cottage's windows to remain open, letting in the sounds of the loch and the scent of heather. Kate had managed to dress in one of her favorite outfits, a simple blue dress that brought out the color of her eyes and reminded everyone of happier, healthier times. They began with a formal presentation of the memory book that George had compiled. Each photograph was accompanied by captions written in Charlotte's careful handwriting, capturing not just what was happening in each image, but how everyone had felt in those moments. The book became an instant treasure, something that would preserve not just visual memories but emotional ones as well. Dinner was served by candlelight in the cottage's dining room, with the good china that the advance team had somehow managed to procure from palace stores. Each dish was perfect, not just in taste but in the love and attention that had gone into its preparation. Kate managed several bites of each course, her appreciation for the effort making even small amounts feel like a feast. The promised dance party followed dinner, with music provided by Louis's collection of children's songs played through William's phone. They danced to everything from classical waltzes to silly pop songs that made everyone laugh. Kate participated from her chair, conducting the family orchestra with graceful hand movements and providing commentary that turned simple movement into performance art. As the evening wound down, the family gathered around Kate's chair in a circle that felt both protective and inclusive. The cottage's fireplace cast dancing shadows on the walls, creating an atmosphere of warmth and intimacy that made the outside world seem very far away. "I have something for each of you," Kate announced, producing a small wrapped package for every family member. Inside, the children found lockets containing tiny photographs. Charlotte received one with a picture of them reading together. George got one showing him teaching Kate to tie fishing flies, and Louis found an image of them building sandcastles on the loch's small beach. William's gift was different. A simple gold band engraved with coordinates that marked the exact location of the cottage. "So you can always find your way back to this place," Kate explained. "And remember that home isn't just a building, but wherever we choose to love each other completely." The celebration had achieved exactly what Charlotte had hoped for. Instead of focusing on what they were losing, they had spent the evening honoring what they had gained from their time together. The cottage had witnessed something extraordinary, a family choosing joy in the face of sorrow, creating beauty despite heartbreak. Later that night, as William helped Kate prepare for bed, she reflected on the day's events. "Thank you for letting me have that," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know it wasn't easy to plan a party when what?" William asked gently. "When we both know it might be one of the last times I'll have enough energy for something like this." William sat on the edge of their bed, taking her hand in both of his. "Every day with you has been a celebration. Kate, tonight was just making it official." The next morning brought the harsh reality that Kate's burst of energy for the celebration had come at a significant cost. She woke disoriented and weak, her breathing labored in a way that immediately concerned Dr. Mitchell. The medical team moved into more active management mode, adjusting medications and monitoring vital signs with increased frequency. The children sensed the change immediately, their celebration from the night before giving way to a quieter, more protective watchfulness. They moved through the cottage with careful steps, speaking in whispers unless directly addressed, their usual childhood energy dimmed by an instinctive understanding that something fundamental was shifting. William found himself caught between his roles as husband and father, trying to provide Kate with the comfort and support she needed, while also preparing the children for what was clearly becoming inevitable. Dr. Mitchell helped him navigate these competing demands, offering practical guidance about managing Kate's care while maintaining family connections. "The most important thing now," she explained during one of their morning consultations, "is to ensure that everyone feels they've said what they need to say and shared what they need to share. This is the time for closure, not false hope." The 6th week arrived with autumn's first breath touching the highland air. Kate's condition had deteriorated to the point where she rarely left her bed, but her mind remained clear and her spirit undiminished. The cottage had transformed into something resembling a peaceful hospice, with medical equipment discreetly positioned but never dominating the warm, family atmosphere they had worked so hard to maintain. Dr. Mitchell had prepared William for this stage, explaining that Kate's body was beginning the process of letting go, even as her consciousness remained present. The children understood, with the remarkable clarity that young people often possess in such situations, that their time together was now measured in days rather than weeks. William had made the difficult decision to limit outside communication to absolute essentials. Calls from palace officials, government ministers, and well-meaning family members were politely deferred by the security team. This was time for immediate family only, for the most sacred and private of goodbyes. The children had established their own routines around Kate's care. Charlotte would arrive each morning with fresh flowers gathered from the moors, arranging them in small vases throughout the bedroom so that Kate would wake to beauty and fragrance. George appointed himself the family's storyteller, reading aloud from adventure novels and creating elaborate fictional accounts of Highland legends that made even Kate laugh, despite her weakness. Lewis had claimed the role of chief guardian, rarely leaving Kate's side for more than a few minutes at a time. He would curl up in the large armchair beside her bed, chattering about everything and nothing, providing a constant stream of 5-year-old observations that somehow managed to be both innocent and profound. On a particularly clear morning, Kate surprised everyone by asking William to help her move to the cottage's sunroom, where floor-to-ceiling windows offered an unobstructed view of the loch and mountains. The effort exhausted her, but the change of scenery seemed to revive her spirits in a way that medical interventions couldn't match. "I want to see everything," she explained, settling into a comfortable chair positioned to capture the full panorama of Highland beauty. "I want to remember how gorgeous this world is." The family spent that day in the sunroom, bringing all their activities to Kate rather than leaving her alone even briefly. William worked on correspondence that couldn't be delayed, but from a position where he could maintain constant visual contact with his wife. The children played quiet games on the floor nearby, their voices providing a gentle soundtrack of normalcy. As afternoon faded toward evening, Kate made a request that initially surprised everyone. "I want to call your father," she told William, "and my parents. There are things I need to say while I still can." The conversations were arranged carefully, with Dr. Mitchell standing by to provide support if needed. King Charles spoke with Kate for nearly an hour, their discussion covering everything from royal duty to grandparent responsibilities. Her parents reached at their home in Berkshire, shared memories of Kate's childhood, and expressed gratitude for the happiness she had found in marriage. These calls seemed to provide Kate with a sense of completion, as if she were systematically addressing every important relationship in her life. She spoke with her siblings, with close friends from university, and with several palace staff members who had become genuinely dear to her over the years. The evening brought what would become their final family dinner together. Kate managed only a few spoonfuls of soup, but her presence at the table made the simple meal feel festive rather than somber. The children shared stories from their day's adventures, and William recounted phone conversations with relatives who sent their love. "Will you promise me something?" Kate asked as they cleared the dishes together. "Will you promise that you'll bring the children back here someday? Not next year or even in a few years, but when they're older and ready to make new memories in this place?" William nodded, understanding that she was asking for more than just a future vacation. She wanted assurance that the cottage would remain a place of joy, rather than just sorrow. That their children would eventually be able to return without overwhelming sadness. That night, the entire family slept in the master bedroom. William and Kate in their bed, the children arrayed on mattresses and sleeping bags on the floor around them. It was cramped and probably violated several royal protocols, but it felt exactly right. They were circling the wagons, creating a fortress of love that could protect them through whatever came next. Kate woke before dawn, her breathing more labored than it had been even the day before. William stirred immediately, attuned to every change in her condition. In the pre-dawn darkness, they held hands and listened to their children's peaceful breathing, storing up these final moments of wholeness. "I think today might be the day," Kate whispered, her voice barely audible but carrying absolute certainty. William felt his heart break and rebuild itself simultaneously. "Are you ready?" "I'm ready to stop fighting so hard," she replied. "I'm ready to let go of everything except love." As the sun rose over the loch, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Kate asked William to open all the windows in the bedroom. Highland air filled the room, carrying the scent of heather and the sound of water lapping gently against the shore. It was exactly how she wanted to experience her final day, surrounded by family, embraced by natural beauty, and feeling completely at peace. The children woke to find their parents holding hands and watching the sunrise together. Without being told, they seemed to understand that this day would be different from all the others. They climbed onto the bed carefully, creating a tangle of arms and legs and love that felt like the most natural thing in the world. Dr. Mitchell arrived early and assessed Kate's condition with quiet efficiency. Her professional opinion, delivered privately to William, confirmed what they all sensed. But rather than dwelling on medical details, she focused on comfort measures that would allow the family to spend these precious hours together without distraction. Throughout the morning, Kate drifted in and out of consciousness, but during her alert periods she was fully present with her family. She listened to Charlotte read from a book of poetry, watched George demonstrate card tricks he had been practicing, and sang softly along with Louis's favorite lullabies. As midday approached, Kate's breathing became increasingly peaceful, each breath coming more slowly than the last. The family maintained their vigil, taking turns holding her hand, whispering words of love, and simply being present for whatever was to come. William found himself thinking about their wedding day, about the vows they had exchanged in front of billions of people around the world. They had promised to love each other in sickness and in health, for better and for worse, until death do them part. Today, they would honor the final portion of that commitment with the same grace that had characterized their entire marriage. The Highland cottage had become a sacred space, witness to the most profound expression of human love imaginable. Outside, the world continued its daily rhythm, unaware that within these stone walls a family was learning that even endings could be beautiful when faced with courage and unity. The afternoon sun slanted through the bedroom windows, casting everything in a golden light that seemed to transform the ordinary cottage room into something ethereal. Kate's breathing had settled into a rhythm that was both peaceful and increasingly distant, as if she were slowly traveling toward something the rest of them couldn't yet see. William sat beside the bed, holding her left hand while Charlotte held her right. George had positioned himself at the foot of the bed, his camera forgotten for once as he focused entirely on being present for his mother. Louis had curled up on the bed itself, his small body pressed against Kate's side, his 5-year-old faith allowing him to offer comfort without fully understanding what he was comforting. Dr. Mitchell remained in the room but stayed near the windows, available if needed but respecting the sacred nature of these final hours. Her presence was reassuring without being intrusive, a professional guardian ensuring that Kate's passage would be as comfortable as possible. Around 3 o'clock, Kate opened her eyes with sudden clarity, as if summoned back to consciousness by the need to share something important. Her gaze moved slowly around the room, taking in each face with the intensity of someone trying to memorize beloved features. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible but carrying absolute sincerity. "Thank you for the most beautiful life anyone could ask for." William squeezed her hand gently. "Thank you for choosing us," he replied. "For choosing this life, this family, this love." Kate's eyes closed again, but her breathing remained steady. The family maintained their vigil in comfortable silence, each lost in private memories while remaining connected through their shared presence. Outside, the Highland landscape continued its eternal beauty, providing a backdrop of permanence that somehow made their temporary situation more bearable. As evening approached, Kate's breathing became even more peaceful, each exhalation seeming to release her further from the physical world. William found himself remembering their last anniversary dinner, just 2 months before her diagnosis, when they had laughed about growing old together and wondered what their children would be like as adults. Charlotte began humming softly, a lullaby that Kate had sung to all 3 children during their infancy. George joined in with his deeper voice, and soon the room was filled with gentle harmony that seemed to wrap around Kate like an audible embrace. Louis added his piping soprano, creating a family choir that sang of love and memory and hope. As the Highland sun began to set, painting the loch in shades of crimson and gold, Kate's breathing grew even quieter. William felt her hand relax in his, the tension she had been carrying for months finally releasing. Her face, which had shown the strain of illness for so long, appeared peaceful and somehow younger, as if approaching death had lifted away everything that was non-essential. At 6:47 in the evening, as the first stars appeared in the Highland sky, Kate drew one final peaceful breath. The exhale seemed to last forever, carrying with it all the love she couldn't take with her, and leaving behind a silence that was both heartbreaking and strangely comforting. The family remained motionless for several minutes, as if moving might somehow disturb the profound peace that had settled over the room. Finally, William leaned forward and kissed Kate's forehead, whispering words that were meant for her alone. Dr. Mitchell approached quietly and confirmed what they all knew. Her professional duties carried out with the same respect for dignity that had characterized her entire involvement with their family. The children said their own private goodbyes, each in their own way, while William held them close and tried to process the magnitude of what had just occurred. In the hours that followed, as necessary arrangements were made and official notifications were sent, the cottage seemed to hold them in a protective embrace. The security team handled external communications with extraordinary discretion, ensuring that the family's grief remained private for as long as possible. The children's reactions reflected their individual personalities and ages. Charlotte cried quietly, but seemed to find comfort in helping with practical tasks, folding Kate's clothes and organizing her personal belongings with careful reverence. George retreated into himself initially, then emerged with a determination to document everything, as if preserving visual memories could somehow make the loss more manageable. Louis, perhaps because of his youth, seemed to accept what had happened with remarkable equanimity. He continued to talk to Kate as if she were still present, sharing his thoughts about the day's events and asking questions that no one felt equipped to answer. 3 days later, they prepared to leave the cottage that had sheltered their final weeks together. The packing was done carefully, with each item carrying memories that made it precious beyond its material value. The memory book that George had created was wrapped with special care, destined to become a family treasure that would tell their story to future generations. On their last morning, William stood alone in the bedroom where Kate had died, trying to absorb the magnitude of what they had experienced in this simple Highland cottage. 6 weeks ago, they had arrived as a family facing an impossible situation. They were leaving forever changed, but somehow stronger rather than broken. The drive back to London was somber but not despairing. The children had processed their grief in the safety of the cottage, surrounded by natural beauty and complete privacy. They were returning to their public roles fortified by memories of their mother's grace and courage, equipped with lessons about love that would sustain them throughout their lives. The state funeral that followed was everything that protocol demanded: magnificent, solemn, and befitting someone who had served her country with distinction. But for William and the children, the real farewell had already taken place in a small Scottish cottage, where they had learned that even endings could be beautiful when faced with courage and love. Months later, when the worst of the public mourning had passed and they had begun to rebuild their lives around Kate's absence, William would sometimes dream of the cottage by the loch. In these dreams, Kate was always there, not as she had been in her final days, but healthy and vibrant, calling to them across the water and reminding them that love never really ends, it just changes form. The embrace that the world had, witnessed through carefully chosen photographs and measured statements, was only the public face of something far more profound. What had really happened in those Highland weeks was a masterclass in how to say goodbye with grace, how to love without reservation in the face of loss, and how to create meaning even in the midst of heartbreak. Years would pass before William could bring himself to return to the cottage, but when he finally did, accompanied by his grown children and their own families, he would discover that Kate had been right. The place had remained sacred not because of sorrow but because of love. The cottage by the loch had witnessed the most profound expression of family devotion imaginable, and that witness had transformed it into something eternal. The world had watched their story unfold with fascination and sympathy, but the true measure of their achievement wasn't in the public's response. It was in the strength and character of the children who emerged from that experience, in William's eventual ability to love again, and in the legacy of grace under pressure that Kate had left behind. Their farewell had indeed left the world speechless, but not because of any single dramatic moment. Instead, it was the accumulation of countless small acts of love, courage, and dignity that created something larger than any individual gesture. They had shown that even in the face of ultimate loss, it was possible to choose hope over despair, love over bitterness, and grace over surrender.